Hello, Fam Jam. You're lived. Celebrate. Don't wait too late. No, we don't stop. We can't stop. We gotta celebrate. Hey, 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 hey. I'm Liv too. And you can call me Elliot. Because that's my name. You couldn't wear it out. Because I'm already wearing it in. All right. I'm in a bit of a silly mood. So, pretty much the only mood, maybe. No, that's not true. I was going to say it's the only mood that I'm in when I make videos, but sometimes I'm very like somber and morose. And I've got a lot of clarity around describing a very powerful methodology, technique, combined with veils of understanding for kind of navigating this most fascinating time in our lives. And I really mean that in all the lives across time, because it's all now. But that's another rabbit hole. We'll leave that alone. But it can't be left all the way alone because it's connected. And now I'm talking about transmutation, alchemy, hermetics, singularity, blah, 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 blah. Words. So I will continue with the preface that depending on your self-study and depending on your, like, what you use in your world to elucidate that self-study, it can be sport, it can be pop culture, it can be chess, right? For me, it is, I want to say everything, but I really mean that in the substantial way of like the stuff. So that said, what I'm going to say is not going to be complicated, but it may be complex. Let's describe the difference. Complicated. I could be socially biased and be like, just like, complicated is when you fucking try and confuse people. But that's just the like effect of the cause, and the reason can be altogether different. Really, complicated is just something that hasn't been refined to its deeper degree through which one can exemplify their understanding through like knowing it or doing it and being it. They don't have to remember anything. It's no memorization, it's becoming. And complex, conversely, is anything and everything composed of as many little parts, ingredients, that you can muster, but the harmonious action of those little parts and your understanding of them create a surface, a skin, by which it looks simple. And then the short answer is complicated is like mechanization, and complex is nature. Complicated is confusion. Complex is universal. Continuing, the great divide that we are crossing and bridging is the perception of separation, and then taken to another degree, what is often also called duality. So I'm just gonna roll, and I have all the faith that anything that isn't within your understanding, it's not because it has nothing to do with you in your inability. In fact, if you can watch this trying to find the things that don't make sense to you, or even scarier, conflict with things you believe you understand, then you are questing. And whatever you're going to gain by even observing this, like I'm not really teaching you, you're teaching yourself by answering a question, and it led you here. It will expand your terminology, but I also encourage you to slot it into your ever-growing field of relatability. Okay? So duality, separation are not the same thing. Let's put separation on a spectrum of the most separate, because that's separation, most separate, averagely separate, and then the least separate. You see how its separation is only separation. It doesn't include a distinction for unity. But separation isn't the enemy, it's a useful term. Dualism, which I think is a funny word in that it includes dueling. And as opposed to being antagonistic, like that can be useful, right? So let's say middle dualism, evenly matched. Dualism, as seen as like, well, kind of society in a little way, previous to our not mass, but pocket awakening that will transform to mass in the process of transmutation. So there's like this, it's a dual, but really it's not a dual because it's mostly just the one thing. And then we kind of like, but we know the essence of this other is possible. And then in actuality, the other side can be described the same way, but it's just the most different from whatever we're dueling. Okay? So duality, separation, not the same. But when they're used synonymously, it will only result in cognitive dissonance, because inevitably you'll bump up against an environment where you're like, does that make sense? I don't know. And that's fucking waking up to ourselves. Context is everything. And when we learn to build the context of the external within, then it's not arbitrary. It just seems to be the way that this whole thing works. And the only reason we're discovering it is because of our continued insistence on knowing the truth of ourselves. So in this examination of duality, there is a polarity of communities in how they describe it and how they feel about it. On the one hand, in my perception, there's this grand march towards oneness. All is one, we are all one. There is no ego, there is no self. You are everything, everything is you. And at the most kind of like one side of that extreme is like, that's it. It's like a dissolution of the self is even too kind. It's like an ignorance of the self, to, I would say, a fault. But that is my judgment, and judgments are fair, and I'm not judging anyone, just circumstance. And this is like what we see on the fucking ads. It's like, all is one. Learn how to navigate the oneness. All is one. All is one. So like, let me teach you how to pay me. Oneness. You're paying me, so you're basically paying yourself. I'm being a facetious asshole, but only a little bit. Because I'm describing something true, right? And on the other hand, is there also like the super common, basically, if that oneness has become pop culture. Before that, it was the empowerment of the individual. You are everything. Like, you are everything. Everything is you by virtue of how you interact with it. Eye for an eye, look out for number one, that whole jazz. Continuing, because it's not really like the principle of this conversation, I call that's bullshit. It needn't be bullshit, but if you look further, it's bullshit and not useful. Let's talk about difference, okay? And now we're going to go into the emotions, because I am a polarized individuation of the all grace, all glory, allness in distinction that polarizes towards the masculine gender, not sex, but gender. In that, if we look at this can be a useful model. Existence, matter, thought. Thought moves. In fact, it moves the quickest. Matter moves, but can resemble, just in relation to thought, is fucking slow, right? And so thought kind of innervates matter. Matter is formed. I don't want to say is formed, because the primacy of matter is basically it chooses the form, and then they meet in the middle, in the now. But thought has no power. And this is useful. You can think things and they not create much emotion. And by virtue, or rather create much feeling, because I want to create a distinction for usefulness between feeling and emotion. Because thought is so subtle, insubstantial in its essence, you can think anything and everything. But unless it is innervated, or enervated, what's the opposite of innervated? I actually looked this up. Whatever. Unless it is like chosen by matter, by power, right? It flits in and out of existence. It's there, and then it's has no substantiality. So that as like a useful like conversation tool. Okay, about 15 minutes is about. It's about enough time where I can start to be a little more direct, because if you're still watching, then good on you. You're doing this for you. And you're hearing the truth within you through me. And I deeply desire to speak plainly with you. But YouTube is not the platform for plain speaking of wisdom. Because the more specifically true the wisdom, the more like the higher in the hierarchy and lower it can traverse, which is to say that you make powerful things simple and then put them on a platform to be understood by the simple-minded that doesn't grasp the complexity and thusly the ramifications of cause and effect outside of its perceived actions. Like that's abuse. That's ignorance, and it's a little bit unavoidable. But what makes it abuse is when you don't care, as opposed to you mean well and you tried everything, which means it'll never really happen again in the exact same way, because you're learning how better to be yourself and achieve that which you most desire. And if you're on this quest, it's loving. Emotions are feeling meeting thought in cohesion of the being, the person, the one that's experiencing them. I'm not talking about accuracy. Feeling emotions, you feel emotions. You also feel stubbing your toe. Stubbing your toe can create emotions. Stubbing your toe can also not create emotions, or rather, it can create powerful emotions or less powerful emotions. Because thought and feeling, energy and matter, or movement and matter, emotions are where they meet energy moving, or moving, or like movement moving the energy, because everything kind of goes both ways in polarity. So now we've got emotions. Polarity we kind of discussed, so I'll just discern a little deeper. Positive and negative. More positive, less positive towards what we'll call negative. Polarity is what we describe as being on the same spectrum. So separation and unity are not polarities of one another. That's important. Okay? There is no unity in separation, because separation in its wholeness describes it's really an altogether different state. They seem similar, but they're as different as color and sharpness. Right? Color, red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, violet. Sharp, less sharp, kind of dull. Spoon. All right. But where does really sharp and less sharp happen? Where does red become orange? The short answer is resonance. And the point that I'm making is that polarities of a spectrum differ only by degree. And because they are the same and differ only by degree, they become one another. In necessity, they exist as that. Rhythm. Okay. It's more useful for you to just be creating your own perception as to what I could possibly mean by that display. But in words, it's like the movement of an aspect in polarity is like compensated or counterbalanced by its equal, right? Like look, I'm not going to move my hand. Eventually, it'll go less and less. But that first one, it'll always do that until acted upon by another force, another polarity, in this case, my body and gravity. So let's talk about transmuting your emotions. And let's just fucking go for the jugular. Fear. One of my favorite comedians is Bill Hicks. He might even very much be my only favorite comedian because I don't really have favorite comedians. Like, I don't really think like that. But why he's my favorite is because I love his heart and what in his divinely shortened existence here, kind of the truth and that he manifested as himself. He's worth Googling and watching his videos and stuff because he's fucking awesome, super funny, and spits pure, unadulterated wisdom. And one of the things that is kind of commonly said, like a couple things that he says that really resonated a lot when I first heard it with him. It's like, it's all a ride. You get on the roller coaster, you jump in the cart, you go up, you go down, you go side, sometimes fast, sometimes slow. It's like, it's all a ride, and it's just a ride. And that has to do with polarity and rhythm too. But what I want to bring up is the kind of ultimatum, the proverbial ultimatum that he almost like celebratedly offers. It's like, it all comes down to love and fear. Choose love, choose fear. And I couldn't agree more, because I'm always understanding that more deeply to the most, and at its most simplex, it really is true. But the common misperception is that love and fear are opposites. Shit, he may have even said that considering them opposites. So you got to choose. They're opposites. Choose one side, and they're not. How do you know if something is polar? Can something be it while being the other? And if it can, then they're not polar opposites. Can my love generate fear? Can I be loving and in fear? Yes. Can I be fearful of love? Yes. Can fear stop me from loving? No. And really, it can't stop anyone from loving. You can stop, like, what, the exhibition of loving. And can loving shift fear? Yeah. But no. And maybe we'll come back to that. I'm not right. Nobody's wrong. I find it really useful when I hear contrary things to my understanding by people that I enjoy. If you're here, I'm assuming, ass of you and me, that you enjoy my company as such. How could I be right? What, in your own estimation, not agree to disagree, but how could you agree with me in that statement? And then in the middle of that out, it'll be fun. So you can't love yourself out of fear, but that's pretty much the common spiritual advice. Love and hate. That depends. Because one of the most abusive paradigms of this world and against humanity is the, like, ignorance and desecration of the truth beyond everything is subjective. It's like, oh, everything is subjective. This is your, like, nothing can't be subjective except there's this grand deception that we all think the same. No, we don't. We all think differently. Well, except if you have autism or attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, or if you're clinically insane, or if you're a creative genius, or a musician, or a painter, or an electrician, or a plumber, right? Like, all of these ways of thinking what we call differently, the assumption is what like, we're thinking the same thing when I say all those things. A little more simply, I know I think quite differently than my contemporaries. Like, I'm particularly averse and not wired towards passive aggressive behavior. That isn't a judgment. It's just not, it's like foreign to me, in much the same way that not making eye contact might be for um, a being who's been labeled with like the as on the autistic spectrum. It's like it's just they don't they don't think that way. So it's not a thing that needs to be corrected or not corrected or even perceived as a distinction. In that way, I have been known in my life to do it unconsciously as like a model, or even like subconsciously as like a model of communication that I've learned from people. But like when someone's being passive aggressive, pretending to be, how do you define passive aggressive? Like saying something critical in general, but you're really speaking about someone specifically and they're a part of your audience. God, that was hard. My point is, no one thinks like you until you share your thinking through emotions and communication, because it is entirely possible to come into knowing and synergy with another person so that you are actually perceiving the same thing in your mind field. I know that seems like an impossibility, but on the spectrum of individuation, one soul, one mind, many souls, many minds. When we meet in the sphere of this polarity, we can know one another as ourselves and as other. Okay, I have a really busy day in the best way. And at 33 minutes, that's a good cue to wrap up. Because if you're still watching, then you're definitely deserving of just some techniques. Okay? When you feel something that is less than awesome, let's say use anger, because that's one that I can really relate to. And we'll noodle it out together. When I feel anger, anger is more angry and less angry? And but what is anger? Well, let's describe it as an emotion, right? Anger is not a feeling, right? It always takes the form of thought that creates movement, right? If I stub my toe and it makes me angry, then I'm moving through my perception, my thought form, my self-identity as an expression towards maybe why it's there, So someone else, maybe myself, fuck, I can't believe I did that. That, like, anything and nothing, it just fucking hurts. I'm angry. I'm angry at being in pain. So anger is an emotion that can be described as potent, heated, because, like, on the one spectrum, like, we've got cold anger, which feels like a slow burn. It doesn't move things very quickly, but fuck, you can move your whole life living that emotion. It's combustive, anger. And you can be fucking happy go jojo, and then all of a sudden something happens and you can be the most angry just like that. And to be divulgent, that's pretty much how I get angry. Not quite so, like, manically, but that's through my growth. Because most things don't fucking bother me. If something bothers me, it really bothers me. If it's making me angry, which I don't love feeling, and I've been taught to really suppress expressing that, because I want you to not be afraid of me. Because I've got muscles, and people hit each other and do awful things. So, okay, now we got kind of what anger is. Can I turn anger into love? No. In fact, I'm usually only really ever the most angry at people that I love. If I don't love, then it's not making me angry. I probably don't care. So can I use love to transmute anger? Yes. And we'll get to that. Because that's like another level. But firstly, more angry and less angry? Is there like a different way to describe it? In my experience, it's more angry or less angry is basically, am I being rational in my anger and responsible? Or am I being just rash? I'm just noticing that. Not, just rash and irresponsible. Am I being appropriate? Am I being inappropriate? So in transmuting anger, for instance, the key to even access the door of transmutation is acceptance. You cannot transmute anger if you're not angry, but if you are. Because then it's not an emotion, it's a feeling, and it's connected to all your other feelings. So other things will move you, modified by your anger, which is running wild. It is. It's not even, forget rain. It's like, it's operating behind the scenes. So once you really accept that you're angry, the next thing is to decide really, maybe, should you be angry? And that's really just a gift. Because if you ask yourself that, the answer is yes. Just give yourself that. Should I be angry? Yeah, I should be fucking angry. Because if you're feeling it, man, yeah. Yeah. Even if it's inappropriate. Okay? Even if you're really doing awful things, we're not there yet. Should you be feeling angry? Yeah. And then in the moment, and this really gets really awesome with refinement, being someone that repressed their anger for everything except bursts their whole life. Now I still burst, but I'm like super appropriate and respectful. And for me, I guess, right, anger has a lot to do with reason. Because as I transmute my anger from irrational towards rational, I love myself. Because the respect that you give another through when you're expressing the emotion of anger is the respect that you have for yourself. And it may seem disrespectful to another perception, the way that you're expressing your anger. But if you are being self-respecting and self-responsible, that's what matters. And it's also an invitation towards other for them to transmute whatever they're feeling based on their own understanding. Because if you're being respectful and whatnot, but you're cussing and you're really, you're really exclaiming, then then cussing is appropriate, and your potency is a just rhythmic compensation for the vibes that they're throwing at you. And if you don't express that anger, right? Because on the other side of irrational can be like not expressing, like feeling the anger, knowing you're angry and not expressing. Uh, that does nobody a service. They're not the person. The thing that is inspiring that emotion is not receiving the honest feedback. However, they deal with it, right? Maybe they don't know how to deal with your anger, but at least they know. And in my experience, the more, speaking of anger, the more, the closer, when you go all the way to that, like most appropriate, most self-respecting, most loving anger, I can be the most angry in the moments where I'm engaging whatever the environment is that's making me angry, that I'm allowing to make me angry in my appropriateness. And then pretty much right after, it's like whether I'm still in the same room, but like it can be the person said something or they leave or whatever, just any appropriate tweak in the environment, I register and I'm not angry anymore. And that takes us to rhythm. Joy and sorrow for me are of a spectrum. I can be joyful and sorrowful back to back even, but not at the same time. But on the spectrum, I'm just taking apart shit and it's like, why do you have like a plug by yourself? Like, I work so much with my mind and my fucking jibber jabber that doing this stuff brings me joy. It's always complex, but that doesn't tire me. and this is like our challenge as those walking the electromagnetic paths, the empath, versus the those that are like drunk on like the narcotic of is it's narcissist. When you feel joy, it's going to make you feel the most like the exact same amount of sorrow. It has to. It has to. Because when you feel joy, uh, it's in relation to sorrow that you've ever felt. And so you might feel really joyful and then be reminded of how far you've come or when you were really sorrowful, right? Or you could be joyful for a week and then you can't be joyful for a week just like all the time. Eventually, uh, it swings. And then you're like, and then you find a reason and we go into that sorrowfulness. And this would really suck if it was the only way to navigate this shit. I just like fucking plugged my ear in. But, and this is like, this is like the juice, the nectar. This has to do with resonance, rhythm, rhythm, rhythm. But where they all that point that doesn't move is your rainbow bridge, your navigation. You can neutralize the rhythm of your emotions by navigating what you place your attention on. One of my pet peeves is the way that we describe emotions that we don't like as low vibration and emotions that we do like as high vibration. That just tells me people don't know what the fuck they're talking about. And my strong language around that is toward the spectrum of the people that say that and do damage, right? Because they're speaking with an authority and they're authorizing ignorance versus the other side of the spectrum of lovely people using it as a term of relation, and it's deeply couched within the context of the story that they're telling, the message that they're purveying, so that it's not the high vibration or the low vibration, it's the meaning that's being conveyed. Therefore, however you think about it, it can't create damage because you're like the word is on a different level of the meaning. But I don't want to confuse that with this. Let's just keep it simple because this is a little bit complex. Because the truth is, in my understanding and my estimation, because it's not absolute, is that the most low vibration emotion of all is love. And the highest vibration of all is love. And all the emotions in between are different resonance factors of that expression, and not in negativity or positivity in terms of judgment. So, low vibration love, why do I think that? Because the closest to resting state of any vibrating thing would be hardly vibrating. And whether the universe started in high vibration, moving towards low vibration, or it's started in low vibration and when I go to the extreme, the extremes of vibration exhibit, in my opinion, the extremes of the truth of love. Low vibration things, like low vibration wavelengths, are span great distances, but move slowly. So it has a little energy, right? It has a little energy, so it um, that's not a good way to do it. Anyways, if a thing is low vibration, it's boo, boo, and the distance is time. So my heart has a lower vibration than my mind. You know, boo, boo, boo. My resting heart rate was like 42 or something like that. It's a little higher now since um, I've had healing, but stupid anyways. Whereas the mind can be a lot faster. So fear, and also, so yeah, so distance is in time. So over all of the largest amount of time, I'm going to find love. The thing uh, that beats the least frequently, but the farthest distance, that basically um, that basically defines distance, is love. And then the fastest possibly moving thing like 4 beats. Okay. Low frequency, energy, 4 beats, 4 beats, high frequency. But if we look at it, the same amount of distance as the 4 low vibration, right? Like, how many beats is that? So the higher the frequency, the smaller it is, but the higher capacitance for energy. So really, the potential for resonance is for the highest frequency to map itself onto the lowest frequency. And then the low frequency and the high frequency become each other. At 55 minutes, 11 seconds, that is some fucking, like, that's like a, I just told you how basically everything works. So, in that regard, if you feel love mostly, lots of love, less love, and it's mapped as a less frequent thing, then you're going to swing extremely and for longer periods of time. If you experience love as something that, like, it's like comes and goes, comes and goes, comes and goes, then you can kind of be manic. But if you experience love as something over a long distance, and the aspect of that love, right, is there, and then when it gets to a point where you like self-define as uh, less love or joy towards sorrow, that you can't change. But as this is happening to another degree, this is also happening. There's another frame of love that's happening more frequently. So everything meets at the 0 point. But instead of engaging or resting in the rhythm as it moves back towards sorrow, you can recognize it, right? Like, say, like, you really want to move, and then moving creates, like, it's like, like, wherever you are, you're like, that sucks, and then you're like, oh, I'm gonna just like really move, and then you move, and you're like, yeah, that's really great, and then it's just really great. It's like, and eventually you're like, oh man, maybe this I can't, like, I feel blah blah blah, whatever. You can recognize you're like feeling this, like, oh, okay, I'm not as jazzed, or there's basically, you're becoming critical and it's movement. But instead of being in the sorrow of it, you can be in the thought form of it. Recognize it without the emotion. Let the thought have its rhythm, right? Towards, like, perfection and imperfection, because everything imperfect is perfect. Everything imperfect is imperfect, and everything imperfect is perfect. But engage on another level of your life that is on the upswing or towards more loving. Maybe it's on the less loving side still, but it's moving towards love. So you go there. And then as it kind of like goes back down, you engage with some other aspect of your life, whether it's the lower one or the highest one, until eventually, through resonance, all of your vibrations have within them all of the love, no matter where you are on that swing. So this is happening the whole time. And within yourself, you're not picking and choosing. You're going one speed the whole time around your 0 point. So, in conclusion, you can transmute any emotion to you can transmute any emotion by degree. Can I be angry and blissed out at the same time? No. So before we had a spectrum of like irrational anger and rational anger. Well, now we have a spectrum of bliss and anger. Can I be a little bliss and a little angry? Well, yeah, I won't describe those things. But because I can't be them at the same time, there exists a possibility of changing one towards the other. The more angry, the more energy it will take to move, to position yourself at its extreme. That's hard. Moderation, however, if you're kind of not all the way blissed out, but like at a quarter way in, a quarter of the way to the extreme, and something moves you towards the extreme of anger, to get back to that blissful feeling, well, it's possible. And if kind of blissful is your norm, it becomes its own spectrum of being, which means that anger, although it can be different and take you out of it, as a part of your norm, it will take a lot of something to change you from more blissful to less blissful. And it depends on what you focus on. But it has to be the truth, your truth. And you have to continually accept your assessment as okay. I shouldn't have done that is foul language. It's actually indecent to say that to someone else when you're trying to, seek forgiveness or whatever. It's like, no, you did that. And whether it was appropriate or not, there are reasons for being unreasonable. Sometimes it's okay. But it's always okay to be yourself. Because when you accept that, you can also accept the circumstances and the environment in which you are accepting that emotion. I'm trying to think of like a monstrous act. The intentional abuse of an innocent. The intentional violent abuse of an innocent. You know what makes that not okay ever? Is when the abuser doesn't in life examine the inappropriateness. Not wrong. And that can be a lot of people, unfortunately. That's okay. They'll die. Death's not such a big deal. They'll have another go. And as we grow in our own resonance, our love will be like waves of repulsion. And or inclusion. Feeling a little less silly now. But my joy wave is still totally on the upswing. There's so much here in what I've shared today, and I hope that you've found something of yourself in us, in our engagement. I love you. It's why I hear. It's why I navigate in my cautious respect for the perils of living truthfully. And it doesn't stop me. And it will never stop me. Right? Being like, all is one, we are the creators, we are divine, like we are protected. Being protected, an aspect of living in that is being responsible and cautious. Not doing things that will get you killed. You're like, Elliot, you're just talking on YouTube. Just talking is the reason for what most people that have been hurt were hurt for. And while I'm doing this, I'm also not doing other things that I really, really resonate with and brings me even more of myself in my being. But that's still swinging. And really, what moves me, whether it's more enjoyment or less enjoyment, is loving. And that free, loving movement. So as much as you can fathom, and if you want to play with me, however much you think I mean it, try to imagine that I actually still mean it more than that. And it'll be the closest to the truth. I love you. And we're loving together. And we're not even close to done. Always and you're just getting started. That's what it can feel like loving you. I love you. All of us. And really you. Namaste. That means I love you.